This is another extremely valuable video that can save you so much time and energy. We're going to divert you away from the wrong path and onto the right path. And so let's start out with exactly what is the wrong path: working with public entities. Now, this is something I knew to an extent before 2025, but I nevertheless pursued working with public entities, governments, etc., because of the new ADA Title II web rule. And so over the last several months, I've had more interaction, like so many more interactions with public entities than I ever have before. And what is what is becoming very clear as I talk to more and more state and local governments, public universities, any type of public entity, what's becoming extremely clear is that these contracts are not even close to worth it. You actually don't want to get these contracts. And I found somewhat of a way around this, and I'm going to tell you what that is later on. But for United States governments, and this could easily apply to governments in other countries, but I know this because I've been talking to so many over the last several months. There are a myriad of problems that make it difficult to work with them and also difficult to make money, to actually make money from these contracts. So my favorite clients, let's start with this. This is the right path. My favorite clients are actually small businesses and small to medium sized companies because they pay and they pay up front. They have far less procurement obstacles, and there's really the administrative work for them, and dealing with them is quite minimal. And this is exactly what you would want and expect in the marketplace: is that, hey, you're in need of services. I am a service provider. We connect. They exchange money consideration in exchange for services. We deliver those services, and everybody goes on their way. And it works out really, really well. So this is who I recommend you target as your clients. Who I recommend that you stay away from altogether are public entities. So obviously this includes state and local governments, but any entities that are publicly funded, I recommend that you not work with them. Now, if it's a private hospital, that's a different story, right? If it's a private entity, that's not who I'm referring to. What I'm referring to are the public entities, and this is just something over and over again. I'm seeing it happen over and over again. Before 2025, I've only had infrequent contact with public entities, but now having having talked to so many and worked through various contract negotiations, of which I've rejected multiple, um, I've come to the conclusion I would not recommend anybody in this membership work with them. So here's why. Here's why that's the case. One is with payment and cash flow, government agencies want to pay you on a delay. So this immediately puts you behind and it puts pressure on you because you're investing the work or your subcontractors are investing the work and you're not getting paid for months at a time. That is extremely difficult and it always puts you under pressure, and you don't know if something's going to come up where you're not going to get paid. I can tell you one of the contracts that I rejected had a clause in it that the public entity does not pay me unless they get funding from the state. And so there's already a contingency that I have nothing to do with. So this is very problematic, and you want to stay away from these net day cycles where at all possible. Now, if it's net 30, it makes that could potentially work out. I can tell you that I took a contract where it's a net 45 with a very large company, and that is because the potential here is for me to get ongoing revenue for a long, long time. So if it doesn't work out, okay, then I've invested a little bit, but this is a company that is frequently generating ACRs. And so there's an audit and there's a VPAT service, and this is just happening for so many different products and services. So in that case, I made an exception because I wanted the ongoing business. I mean, this company could potentially fuel revenue for a long, long time. So in that case, it made more sense. And they're also private. But in general, I recommend that you stay away from these long net cycles. It puts so much pressure on you as a service provider. Even though the money is tempting, you have to keep in mind that the money comes with an asterisk. There's a catch to the money. All right, and then here's the other real. This is the big problem, and this is where you spend so much time, and you start off. And what happens when any this happens with enterprise companies, but especially governments. With governments, it's just baked into the process. There's a bureaucratic process to just them potentially choosing you as a vendor, and it takes a long time. And it's not only the time; it's that the time is extended over weeks and months. So these people do not get to work. Again, think about the marketplace where we have a buyer and we have a seller and they come to an agreement and the money is exchanged and then the work gets done. It's not like that. They take a long, long time. This can be dozens of hours of your time. If there's a request for a proposal and it's up for bidding, there's no guarantee of winning. In fact, you could be even the best service provider on the merits and you still might not win. They have different reasons for why they choose who they do. But here I have they might choose a large firm with a dedicated team over actual expertise. So it's not necessarily about who's the best. You just have to remember that this isn't there's a disconnect. There's a misalignment here between actually getting the right services and choosing the right services, and that frequently does not happen. So there's an investment there on your part. Also, when I talk about catches for the money, excessive contract terms come along with this, and this is why I've easily rejected multiple different public entities, is because the contract terms, I couldn't agree to them. I talked about one earlier. It's like I can't agree to the payment being contingent upon you getting funding from the state. That doesn't work for me. How does that work for me? And I might not get paid. And that's not the only term. You'll look at indemnification. So you have to be careful of this. There are some people out there there are some agencies, firms out there that are accepting these government contracts, but they're not reading them. Like if you read them, it's actually really bad, and you don't want to take on indemnification, high insurance minimums that you have to hold. And then not only do you have to have insurance, you have to have insurance for 3 years after the contract, maybe even longer. And yeah, terms that shift the enormous risk onto the provider with little room to negotiate. And so that's what comes up is like, I'll come back to them and I'll tell them like, look, I can't agree to this, but here's what I can agree to. And there's not really, even if they wanted to negotiate, which I don't know how bad they do really want to negotiate, but even if they did negotiate, they're often restricted by policies that they can't even go around. So it's like not even like they have the autonomy to do this. And by the way, um, AI summarized this for me, so I'm not reading everything here, but this is the takeaway: is that the excessive contract terms just make it. This is one thing where you might not pay close enough attention, but you don't want to take on these contracts because they can come back to you. So there's like risk tied to the contract, and it could easily come back to you. And so that's actually reducing the money because there's percentage money that's lost in risk. Let's see. So we have scope infringement and slow decisions. Yes, I've seen this come up multiple times. So you have multiple people making decisions. You have an approval process that everything needs to go through. There's a budget cycle, and this turns projects that should be something that's easy into months of meetings, and you're waiting, and they're asking for extra things, and you're starting to think, well, this wasn't a part of the contract, and this can happen. And so you want to be very careful who you work with, and I recommend that you work with private companies. And then last, I have here low margins. So if there is a bidding process, then it will drive down the price. So again, that's even if let's say it's a large contract, it's not even as appealing as it may seem, because the margins will be lower. And then there's the administrative side of this, which is there's a lot to get through. And then when you start to stack on the net payments, right, net 60, net 90, the rate drops, and it becomes not worth it to you. So there's just even though initially everything looks good, when it actually plays out, you just watch your money salted away, and you also watch your time along with that, because you have your rates for different services, but you have to consider everything that's tacked onto this. So it makes it very, very difficult for you to actually make money from these contracts, no matter how large they are. So I recommend looking to the private sector and actually working with the smaller entities that want to get things done and don't have these overly burdensome terms. They don't have this slow start. They're looking to get this project done. You don't want to have a project that goes on and on. And early on when I started, I do have some clients where the project just it never ends. And so this is something that I've worked into my agreement, where if your project is lingering, then you're going to pay me for that additional time. But this is very important. And just this year, I mean, not this, yeah, 2026, right? In January, it just comes up over and over again. And I happen to be very visible for the ADA Title II terms. And I was at a speaking engagement recently where I think it was a private entity that dealt directly with the government. And so I spoke at this conference, and it's great in terms of there are so many people that are interested in what I have to say. And then a few people, including this morning, have reached out to me. But what I'm finding out over and over again is I don't want to deal with them. It's not even worth it. Like even if I could get a contract where we could agree to the contract, everything is slow. It just these are overwhelmingly bad contracts that you don't want any part of. So this is my strong recommendation to you: is just to focus in on the private sector and work with the entities that are ready to move, that are ready to act. And as far as the public entities, what's going to end up happening is they're going to be sued over and over again, and their own bureaucracy is going to hurt them more than whatever it saves them. But that's their choice. They're going to find out the hard way. But as for me, I'm oh, and now let me get you to this last part. So I've actually partnered up with a company who will who I become the subcontractor for. So they become the prime and I become the subcontractor. And so what happens is they absorb a lot of the difficulty in dealing with the government. And then I have a contract with them. And so it works out better working through them. And so it also gives me the chance to um, get some larger contracts. And so they mark up my services, which I'm completely fine with. I'm telling you, this administrative side, the administrative side of some of these contracts is it will decimate your margins to the point where you are working for very inexpensively. So this goes against this goes against any type of efficiency, and so you really, really want to stay away from this. And then one other part here is the governments can be very whimsical and decide they need things all of a sudden. So then you have to have a change in your I forget the term, if it's a work order or there's some type, you need to have a change order. I think it's what it's referred to go ahead and account for this new demand that's coming up. And again, it goes back and forth and it takes so long with the changing the contract, having it approved, getting it assigned by different people. Just avoid working with them altogether. Such a valuable lesson. Something that I had an idea of, like I knew that, government entities generally you don't want to work for, but over the last several months, this has become just the more repetitions I get, the more obvious it becomes that there's no money here. Like even if I got a larger contract, it's just going to be salted away in all of these various things that we've discussed. It just makes it so difficult for there actually to be a return on a return on your energy, on your efforts. It's not a matter of direct services. There's too much tacked onto it. So think of it this way: think of it there as a contract that's lean, where it's 97% you providing services and then 3% administration. That's what you want, right? And that's what we see from the small businesses. That's what we see from the small to medium sized companies. Not as much on the enterprise side, although I definitely like the enterprise companies, the larger companies, much more than I like the public entities. But you're looking for the lean contracts, because when you don't get the lean contracts, it becomes very difficult to make money and then also make money faster, like make money in a timely manner. And so it's, even if you're working with a subcontractor who pays you on time, that is much, much better than getting into these long involved contracts. And so this is my strong, strong recommendation, just to again make it so that your business thrives and so that you are not caught up in this bureaucracy and you are not caught up working through administrative work. I've talked about how recently there was another client, and this was different because they were working through a university, but this was a group. I think it was a group of students, or they had some type of company or something to that effect. I don't remember exactly how this played out, but basically they were beholden to the university, so they had to follow various university requirements to actually get the funding, or it was a grant for the work. Again, very straightforward project. We could have had this done in 2 weeks, but they drew this out, and then they started throwing in various requirements that didn't make any sense, like asking for my resume. And there were multiple other line items where it was just like I knew it was going to be a problem, and I cut them off as soon as initially they asked me for a few items. I provided them, and then after I provided them, seemingly that was going to be where the deposit was made and then the work began. But that's not what happened. What happened was they came back to me and they said, "We can't accept your agreement. We cannot pay you in advance." And then two other things. And the point being is that again, it just extended this to more and more. And so you really have to look out for this when you're undergoing procurement, is where you start, everything looks good, and then they start adding on. And sometimes when they add on, they're not done adding on. That's just the initial add-on. And then they do not tell you this until later. So that's something else extremely valuable as you're growing as a small business. Be aware that there are some entities that are going to, on the administrative side, they're going to start by asking you for, let's say, XYZ, which sounds fine. And then what will happen is once you provide them XYZ, they go, okay, well, now we need ABC. And there could even be an extension on that. So very, very helpful information that will save you a lot of time and money. Remember that even though it can be tempting when you get a client or a prospective client where the contract looks good, sometimes it's a mirage because it keeps being pulled further and further away. So every time you get closer to what you think is that body of water in the desert, you realize that you are still miles away. And that can easily happen with contracts with public entities. So again, the point here is avoid any type of service work for public entities. The money's just not going to be there, and it's going to take up so much of your time and energy.